Okay.
Are we good?
All right, we're good to go. Take it
All right.
away.
Sweet. Okay, so this is the next part of our hangout, and I guess what we can start off with is what we went over last time, and that was or what the point of what we were trying to do last time was we were trying to get some communication going between Haskell and PureScript. We were looking at PureScript because we think it's an excellent JavaScript replacement, and we're using Haskell because we think it's a wonderful language to use on the back end. What we did last time is we set up some types, and we set up a tiny web service using Scotty, which is a web server or a web application development, a small web application development framework for Haskell. Um, and we set up something that can serve our data to the web. Um, in addition to that, we began to set up um, uh, we began to set up some PureScript code that's going to actually read in our data and try to do stuff with it. So I guess that's where we're going to pick up. So I guess I'll start going over the code and to get us back up to speed to where we were last time, and then we'll begin again, trying to get our communication up and running, and trying to examine or at least explore how easy it is, how maintainable it looks, how easy the code is to reason about when we're using something like PureScript on the front end and Haskell on the back end. Because the whole point of all this is to actually come out with some reasonably maintainable code so that we can have a sustainable pace of software development. So I guess the first thing we did was we made our data type. We just needed a good piece of data, some reasonable data to communicate with our front end. We chose an address because that's something that usually gets passed around. So we made our address. We gave it some fields. We made an instance of to JSON, which tells us how our JSON is going to be serialized to how our address is going to be serialized to JSON. We made an instance of this address. We called it fake address, and we went ahead and made a route that can get that fake address.
Hey,
Um,
sorry to cut in. Would you mind increasing the font size a bit?
Certainly. That's a little too good. How's that? Is that okay?
Maybe a little more if you could. We've got a small projection screen here. Other people can probably see it okay.
Certainly, I'll try to make it clear.
Okay.
Okay, cool. That certainly works, I suppose. So, okay, so what we were doing, we took our address and we serialized it. We set up a sort of scheme to serialize it to JSON. We made an instance of this address, and we set up a web handler. Our service is going to be on port 3000. We made some routes, index route, which will give us a page that will load our JavaScript dependencies. We have the ability to to load up an address. If you hit the address route, you'll get your fake address coming over in JSON format, which is great. So if we head over here, we should be able to hit address and see our address. So we head to our browser and we see our address. Great. So we know that our web server or our web service is sending back our address. But that's only half the story because we actually need to grab that address and do something with it. So let's take a look at our PureScript code. So what we're looking at now is our PureScript code. Last time what we did is we created an address which looks much like the address that we have over in Haskell. Pretty much, the same thing, except our zip is an integer rather than a number, because JavaScript works with numbers and not integers. So, we're going to use the native JavaScript type, which is great. And we have some foreign code here. So I think this is the first time we're looking at foreign code. This foreign code is the PureScript FFI to make an Ajax call. So right now, there's no real library to make Ajax calls in PureScript. I've seen some things that were worth a try and worth a look, but I think just for simplicity's sake, I went ahead and I wrapped up our Ajax call in the FFI alone, just raw. So and we can see what we see here is that we're actually making this Ajax call. We're going to make a GET request. We're going to make it to the place where we said our Ajax is going to be coming in, and on a successful call, we're going to call something called handle address. We're going to stringify that JSON so that we can actually do stuff with it in our code. Problem is we don't actually have that handle address method. So the first thing we want to do is go ahead and make that handle address method. So that's probably one of the first things we need to actually knock out here. So let's just go ahead and make sure that our PureScript is actually compiling, and it is. So everything is okay. And let's go ahead and add some more. So I want to make this handle address this method. We know that we're getting back our JSON correctly from the server because we saw it in the browser. The next thing we want to do is do something with it, and that's what handle address is going to do for us. So let's go ahead and make that handle address. So let's make a method called handle address. Back as a string, or I know this method takes a string because all of our responses are going to come back as strings. So I know I have a type alias here called response because I don't actually like to just say string. Handle address may be abstracted at some point to maybe a handler. A handler may be a type that bundles up some effects. We don't know yet, but I know that saying that it's a response rather than a string may serve us in the future. So I'm going to go ahead and type alias that to response, and I know that handle address should return us a how about it's going to return let's see, a string. So we take a response and we return it to when we serialize it to a string, which will be dumped to our console so that we can see that we're actually doing something. So that's what handle address is going to do. All right. So what are we actually going to do inside of handle address? Well, since we're reading an address that's going to be in pretty much JSON format as a string, we're probably going to want to somehow get that into string form. Usually, when we're using languages like Haskell and we're using languages like PureScript, a common pattern is to do validation through parsing. Basically, if you give me something and I can't parse it, that means it's probably invalid. And that's kind of the pattern we're going to follow here. We're going to use data.foreign, which gives us the ability to make an instance of a read foreign for address. And what we're doing is we're just taking a JSON object and reading out all the fields here and wrapping that up inside of an address object. I guess what this is saying is that if we can't find these particular fields, then it's gonna fail parsing, and which is a slight validation, but it's good enough for our case. It's not really here. It's not really used for much validation, but you know the idea kind of carries. So let's go ahead and see what we can do here. So I think the method is parse JSON. That's going to be we're going to parse JSON on our. So handle address parses JSON on our response. All right. So let's go ahead and build here to see if that actually is the right everything. So I already have an error. It's saying that data.either I got some kind of type error here. So apparently I'm not getting back a string. That makes perfect sense because I didn't do much in here. So that's great. So what I want to do is I want to call parse JSON on the response and see if I get back the right thing. And if I get back the right thing, then I want to do something with it. So parse JSON actually returns an either. So on the left-hand side, it's going to give us an error. And so I'm going to return that error if I get that error. That's all I want to do because the error is a string and it type checks. On the right-hand side, we should get an address. Now, if we should get an address, I actually want to do something with it. So now I actually have an address. So now that I have an address, I can actually do something with my address. In this case, I can just return it. Address. And it looks like everything type checks. So the type checker actually came in handy here, telling me that I was just making, obvious mistakes. We sorted out those obvious mistakes, and now everything type checks. If we look up here in our JavaScript code, we can see that if we just return that, what it's going to do is it's actually going to log it in the console. So I'm actually expecting things to work. Now, I have about, I don't know, 6, 7 lines of JavaScript here, and that's enough to hide a bundle of errors. So while everything in the TypeScript seems to be okay because it compiled, we still have to worry about the JSON. I mean the JavaScript because those things actually take place at runtime. So let's go to the index page where all this stuff actually gets loaded, and let's see what happens when I call my method request address. So I'm not sure if you can see this because this is really small. Let me see if I can increase the font here. Is there a way to increase the font?
Can you just use Control Plus?
Yeah, that seems to work. Great. All right, so that's as high as it goes. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to check our request address function. So our in JavaScript, our PureScript functions are prefixed with the module PS. Our actual module is called example. So let's go into our example module. And our function that we want to call is request address. So request address is a function, so let's call it. Undefined value is not a string. So we have some kind of error here. Let's see what's going on. All right, so as you can see, when we mess with JavaScript, we get little errors. So if I say address, I get this back. I get the right back from the request. So we're saying the console is telling us Value is not a string. It's really hard to tell where these when I call it straight in the the console like that, it's actually hard to see what value it's actually talking about. Value is I see. Okay, so one of the things that I'm a little confused about here is looking at PureScript is that okay, so this actually uh, when I actually parse JSON, I'm actually parsing it to a string because I don't actually say that it's an address here. So while this actually type checks, it's actually not doing the right thing for us. I don't. So we might be getting an error because of that. So let me see what happens if I just give it. I'm really not sure if that is there, but we will find out. So let's go ahead and remove and go back to the that is not the error that we get. Excuse me. Let's see. So let's just test that this address should be fine for us. And it does. So there we go. I'm not really sure what the problem was there, but I mean that output wasn't actually very helpful, but it looks like we worked through it. Like I said, whenever we delve into the JavaScript land, like all bets are off. It's just like, you know, the PureScript that you actually get back, it's fairly clean JavaScript. So you can go into the console and you can inspect things and so forth and so on. Your JavaScript probably needs to be well tested your JavaScript probably needs to be well tested at all times because you don't have the guarantees that PureScript gives you. So what we're going to do is we're going to
There were a couple of comments too. I don't know if you can see people commenting on the Hangout, but some people were trying to solve the problem you were having there. Sorry that you might not have seen those.
Oh, I'm sharing my screen in full screen mode, so I can't really see the comments that are coming in. I apologize for that. So oh, I see. I don't actually know how to answer these questions, or respond to them. So I'll just move forward. But I am looking at these responses now that they're actually on the screen. So let's actually try to move forward here and get this to work. So I got some things that say I should have put show address, which would invoke a show instance for address, but I don't see that I have show for address. So let me see if what would happen if I try show, because I don't know if show like Haskell you can just automatically derive show instances and so forth. So let's go ahead and give this yeah, it says no instance for show found, for example, address, but that's okay because we're gonna take care of showing this in a little bit. So right now I'll just keep it addressed to keep everything in a green state. Now I'm going to move forward with some more stuff. Now, what we actually have here is we actually have the ability to grab our address and go ahead and do stuff with it. It seems like everything's working in that respect. One thing I can do is I can go up here and I can stick in a console.log and see what X is, and I'm address. So that'll just be like before we move on and do something else. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this, and I'll try this again. And I can see that I actually got my object in there, which is pretty cool. So let's go ahead and do something else. All right, now that we actually have our address, and we're moving forward quite nicely and quite incrementally, because PureScript gives us a lot of the incremental development properties that Haskell does, which is why I love it. And because PureScript is pretty much like well integrated with JavaScript more than other projects of a similar nature, I think this is helping us do those facts are helping us move forward quite rapidly. So let's see if I can do import some library that I created, that I actually ported from Haskell, which is an HTML library called Blaze HTML. So I like that library because it's very simple and it helps us create ubiquitous HTML in a very declarative manner. So I just did a really quick hack job like porting that over to PureScript because I thought it would be very useful. And for the most part, it does turn out to be pretty useful. So I guess behind everyone's back, I went in and I went to my file, and I included a dependency on PureScript HTML, which is going to help us do some cool things like convert our address into HTML and try to get that displayed. So that's one of the things we want to do with PureScript right now. So we have our address coming over from a Haskell backend, which is a very cool thing, and we also have the ability to on the front end hook up some HTML that we can play around with. So one of the things that I want to do with my handle address is I don't want to just print out some random string. I actually probably want to do something like make address to HTML function. And that address to HTML function is going to turn address to HTML. And I guess at that point, I could probably render the HTML. And rendering the HTML will turn it into a string. Rendering the HTML after it turns into a string is will satisfy the type checker, and we can get along with our lives. So, so that'll actually satisfy everyone. So it'll actually even satisfy this guy. So we can take this away. So if we go ahead and try to compile, which we do every once in a while, like we do every so often to try to keep things incremental and keep things green, we'll find out that we can't import unknown module HTML, and that's probably because I didn't call it HTML. I called it text HTML, and I call it text HTML5. So text HTML happens to be the core of everything, and text HTML5 happens to be where all those combinations go. So now it actually likes us, but it says that we have an unknown value addressed to HTML, which is great because we haven't created it yet. So that's actually, the failure we wanted in the binocular, I suppose. So let's make that method address to HTML. And I guess address to HTML is simply going to take an address and return some HTML. Address to HTML is going to this address. And we're going to pull out the object that's in there. If I can, I'm going to stop here and take a look to see if anybody's commenting. So there was a comment like, why is DHC mod HLink complaining about one of the imports? I think it's because it's because there's like this setup in Emacs that tells the command where to find all the packages, and that's probably pointing at the wrong place. So while it's finding most of the packages, it's not finding that one because wherever it's pointing has those packages, but it's not pointed in our project directory, so it doesn't actually find that particular one, which is probably the two package databases probably have everything in common except for that. So there's another one that says that's saying type inference is equating address and so I'm not really sure what's meant here by type inputs is equating address and string, because address. Well, I guess we'll find out too when a failure pops up. Given that error. So I'm not. I really don't know how type inference can be equating address and string right now. But if a comment comes up with more feedback, I'll definitely take that into account. I guess what I'm asking for is more feedback. But let's continue on while that feedback is coming. So what I want to do is I want to turn this into this address into HTML so we can do stuff with it. So I guess I'm going to stick that HTML our address in a div, and then I'm going to put all of its properties in subdivs. So what I can do is I can say div to HTML dot. Let's start with the state. then we'll go ahead and do the other 4 properties. The state, I believe we have a city, street, and zip. Streets and the zip there. Okay. So if everything works out, we should. All right. So that actually was a lot easier than I expected. Address to HTML. We take our address, we convert it into HTML, and we pass it off to render HTML. Let's see if I have any further feedback. Oh, I see. Okay, so these comments seem to be the comment that I was speaking about before seemed to be quite dated. So, so it looks like we were able to convert that to HTML, and everything is cool. Great. So let's give that another shot in the browser here and see what pops up. So, looks like we can. Still getting the same thing. It tells me that this is probably doing something so like caching. Disable cache. Let's try again. It seems to be compiling just fine. I see. I'm not actually following this away. Ooh, JavaScript. Actually, that wasn't JavaScript. That was too much. Alright, so what do we want to do? We want to say we actually want to call handle address in here. Value into our success function. Compile. I misspelling. Which, if we were still in the textbook line, would not have needed. So we have to look at it. So let's try again. So we have an unexpected character, which means that we probably have to do to make everything okay. So let's take a. Let's see. Okay, cool. So we have our HTML string. So we were actually able to render this into HTML by using basically a port Blaze HTML, using some Ajax and getting our value back and just making a simple function that converts it into HTML. Now, one thing that's not cool is that the HTML is really not that pretty. And while Blaze HTML has like this, the real Blaze HTML has a way to make format your HTML so that you can see it better for debugging purposes. I actually hadn't ported that functionality. However, one of the sneakier things that I actually did behind everyone's back again is I went ahead and in my lib directory, let's see, JS beautify. I went ahead and got a hold of this file called JS Beautifier. And what JS Beautifier does is it's apparently supposed to like make your JS nice and pretty, so that when you're when you're in development mode, you can see pretty JS that's easy to debug and see if stuff goes wrong. Otherwise, we just see this hard long string and we can't really like reason about it or do anything with it, and that's bad. So I guess one of the things I can do is, since that's loading, JS Beautifier is loading in my. One of the things I can do is I can make a foreign function. I could actually use our FFI to go ahead and call that and kind of pretty up our JSON for us. So let's actually try to give that a try. So I'll just call that pretty, and I guess this function shouldn't be too ridiculous. So pretty is just going to be a foreign import. I think that's it. This is going to take your HTML string. Let's get a little bit. Let's name this something a little bit more meaningful. So we'll pass in a string of HTML, and what we want to do with the string of HTML is we want to call string of HTML. Also, I think that there's a option that comes with, that you have to supply in order to get like some kind of options object that you have to apply. I don't know what the actual options are right now, but we'll look at that in a second once I finish off this this function. So what we want is that close that up, and we'll say that this table, which is our prettified HTML. So at this point, what we can do is we can head back over to our library and see if the library seemed to have some documentation at the beginning. So let's see if it actually has the documentation for our options, so we can get this thing printing out nice and pretty. So let's do that. So in public, public JS lib, JS Beautify, of course, and everything like this. So let's see. There are some options, and there's a indent inner HTML. So I guess that's kind of what we want. We want to indent the inner HTML. Otherwise, I think we're just going to string that. We want to set that to true. So let's see. So it seems as if I don't know. Looking at that right now, it looks pretty good. So let's go and pass that into our little pipeline here. So pretty. Compiled, and we seem to have an error saying unexpected. And the reason why we have that is because I forgot to put my little sort of escaping things here. I think that'll do it. All right, looks like everything's okay. So with any luck, we'll see some pretty HTML in here. I'll reload and give it another shot. Oh, looks like that didn't happen. So something horribly wrong. Oh, I know exactly what's wrong. Switching back between PureScript and JavaScript is not always the easiest task. cylinder. All right, so it looks like our little JavaScript file worked. So I guess one of the things that we're trying to show here, at least one of the things that I think is worth showing about, well, we've been doing a lot of PureScript and a lot of JavaScript lately, is that we're able to kind of like go back and forth between JavaScript and PureScript quite easily. If we look back at the code, one of the things that that took place is that I actually pattern matched out this JavaScript object after reading it out of raw JavaScript, and I was able to use that sort of as a JavaScript object, almost I guess I'd say in a very similar way. Another thing I've done is I called some of my PureScript code in a foreign function. I find the ability to go back and forth between JavaScript and PureScript like that a real benefit. There's some things that I'd suggest to actually make it even easier. But for now, I'm actually quite satisfied with the ability to bring in arbitrary pieces of JavaScript and just get it working so easily. I really do enjoy that. Another thing I really enjoy about PureScript that maybe if I would have done it here live, we would have been able to see is that PureScript is actually within the JavaScript community. And what do I mean by that? PureScript uses to set up a PureScript project. You usually or a library. You usually use grunts. You'll be using things like Bower, and so PureScript lives within the domain of JavaScript, which actually is a plus in my opinion. I know that there's other sort of Haskell-like things to JavaScript out there, and some of these kind of live in their domain of Haskell. Basically, these things have Cabal files and so forth. I think there's a little bit of a mental benefit in there. There may be a little bit more than a mental benefit. There may be real, tangible benefits to having this PureScript live as a first-class kind of JavaScript entity. I guess that may just be my preference, but I do prefer it that way. So I guess in this example, we've seen how we can call some Haskell on the front end, sort of use these foreign helpers from data.foreign to help us read in and parse out some of the JSON and get that and kind of make everything sane again by helping us handle errors and move it into some pure code and so forth. We've even seen that we've even seen an example of me pulling just some random file that makes that makes HTML pretty and getting that working without too much of an error. Anytime we actually stepped into JavaScript land, we actually bumped up against some errors that didn't quite make sense, and we had to iron that out. And I don't think that has anything to really do with PureScript in general, or Haskell, or anything like that. I just think that's the nature of JavaScript. Having written quite a bit of JavaScript, and having worked with people who've written a lot more JavaScript than I have, that's just JavaScript for you. I know that writing large amounts of tests actually helps with that a little bit, but JavaScript just has I mean, I guess I'm really not afraid to say that JavaScript is pretty much broken in a lot of ways, and it's just kind of like a fact of life here. So now that we actually have this our JavaScript coming out, and we can actually see what's going on, and it's nice and pretty. Maybe we can like, I guess if we don't really have much time, but I guess I can, try to like hook up something foreign that'll actually bind it to the DOM, and we can actually get, that printed out on the page in some way, shape, or form. So let's see what we can do for that. But first, I'm going to check to see if. Okay, cool. So we do have jQuery here, and if we go back and we look at our, let's go ahead and see what we've got here. So we've just got this body here. Let's see if we can like add a child to the body and put that HTML over here to cap off our little exercise here. So I'm actually like not looking forward to doing this little bit because I know it actually is going to put me back in JavaScript land, which is somewhere I don't want to be. So one of the things that I hope happens in the PureScript community is that I hope like more libraries come out that kind of wrap these things and get them safely into PureScript land where we could actually do some rapid development. I know that I'd be interested in writing some of these libraries myself and contributing. So let's see. Some jQuery here, and let's see how jQuery wants to tell me to like add something to a DOM. If anybody is like really familiar with jQuery and knows how to like just append a child to a node after selecting it out, feel free to write it to help out here. So let's just get let's make a fun method called append. Take our printed address and do something cool like append it to the DOM. So what I want to do is I want to append an address. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say that's actually address. Maybe we don't even have. Maybe we can just use JavaScript to do this. Maybe we don't even use it. So what I want to do is I actually want to. So we'll be calling the same child in this slide. So we're going to get our get an element by something. No, so we can't actually. So I'm actually going to have to like, turn this address into like. So let's get this typed and say that this actually takes string and effect. We'll call this effect So it's so let's make a method. We'll call it main. What we're going to do here is we're going to actually let's say that the least has to also we need it. We're going to need our main function to actually to have the ability to to have the ability to make Ajax requests. So that's going to require the effect Ajax here because that's how I would do it. So so I'm just saying, hey, I need these two effects. Is my syntax correct for this? I'm not sure, but we'll find out in a second. So what I want to do here is I want to so what I want to do here is I actually want to make the Ajax call. I want to take the Ajax call and manipulate its content so I can print it into HTML, and then I want to manipulate it down by printing that string of JSON down, or that's the string HTML down. So let's see if we could actually get this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make the Ajax. So I would like to. That's not going to actually work. It's not going to work because I'm not going to get that response from the Ajax. So this all has to be inside of that. So what I want to do is I want to call append address from inside of our name. So we don't really need it to be put in anymore, but we do want to append. So that should be so. Now let's just see what everyone's wanting about. So I'm going to let it check to see what the part they want about and so that you can see what's wrong is to go ahead and compile, which I usually do every once in a while to get things in order, to keep things in order, much like I would do, back when I did a lot of Rails with TDD. I actually use the type system in lieu of writing lots of tests now. So we have an unexpected somewhere in the JavaScript, of course. And of course, this is just me forgetting syntax. And so that should do it for that particular area. Let's try it again. So, I guess that type has to be 2, so let's just make it 1. Let's see if I use our compiler by doing this. So now it's telling me on line 60. applies. So we're actually doing we're actually calling a method that performs an effect. We're calling a function that performs an effect append address, but our type doesn't actually reflect that. So one thing we can do here is we can say that. So this is a good example of how the type system saves us, and this is a good example of this is a very good example of how the type system actually helps us correct errors that quite frankly some people say that the type system doesn't help you correct. Now, the type system just gave you the hint that I'm calling a method that is performing an effect. Now that just drew my attention to the fact that I'm returning a string. And because it drew my attention to the fact that I'm returning a string, it also drew my attention to the fact that up here in the request address, I'm actually returning a string, which is what is something I no longer want to do because my output is actually going to be in the DOM. My output is actually focused on the DOM now. So that type error actually told me that my code was just completely inconsistent. And because it gave me a hint that my code was completely inconsistent, I was able to go ahead and deduce that hey, even though it just gave me this simple type error back that's telling me two things don't match up, as a programmer, as a person, I can go ahead and use that to learn that my code is not doing the right thing in general. So my code was correct a second ago when it was returning that string and I was using that to do a console.log, but now that's not the case. Now my whole idea of what's supposed to happen has changed, and that type error has given me a clue that was the case. So type systems are fantastic by themselves. If you just mindly appease the type system, you'll get very far. But I guess once you get a little, even when you get a little bit used to seeing these type errors, and when you get a little bit used to, reading these types, it starts to give you a great deal of information once you know how to find them, or once you know how to look for them.
Hey, Eric, just wanted to jump in for a second here. I think, unfortunately, we're running down on time, and maybe the notion of type systems and how they can help out in compiling code to JavaScript is a good one to wrap up on. But we've only got about a minute left, so I'll leave it up to you to kind of tidy things up here.
Certainly, thank you, Justin. Okay, so it looks like we ran out of time. So I guess one of the things that we can take away from this is that well, I guess communicating with Haskell to front-end written in PureScript is really not that difficult. So I guess a lot of the things that I've been doing here, I've actually, like for instance, I've never actually used Scotty in any way before, and I was able to get that up and running. I've been using PureScript for like probably a month now, and I was able to actually get that up and running with not too much difficulty. The documentation that's out there for PureScript actually helped me learn a great deal of things about effects and how I can use integrated limits to track code with side effects. Just as a note on that in closing, I actually do like these extensible effects. They help me instead of like grouping everything up into one big island, I can break things down into effects that I can use to discriminate what's actually functions actually doing in finer detail, which I actually like. So I guess what I'm saying is that none of this is really too hard. If you were watching the whole thing, you saw the only trouble that I actually kind of ran into is when I started messing with the JavaScript. When I'm writing in pure JavaScript, I consider myself fairly good at JavaScript, and I've worked with people who I would consider very, very good at JavaScript, and they seem to run into the same problems all the time. JavaScript just doesn't offer any security at all, and it doesn't actually suit rapid development at all. So, I mean, even when you're writing tests, you run into these things that are just semantic errors in the JavaScript. So if you could, when we were living in PureScript land, we actually had very few problems. When we're when we moved into JavaScript land, actually make use of some of these brilliant JavaScript libraries, because JavaScript has wonderful libraries and wonderful tooling. That's actually when we ran into trouble. So the more, I guess the point of the moral of the story is the more code you can move into PureScript, the more code you can move into safety, the better off you're going to be, as long as you keep things simple. And I think PureScript actually is doing a really good, really fine job at keeping things simple, and it's helping, and it's at least helping me move very rapidly with JavaScript development. So I guess I'll leave it there, and I thank everybody for showing up and watching this little exercise that shows how a real engineer might approach doing PureScript from with a Haskell backend. So thanks for watching.
Great, thank you very much, Eric.